Hi, everyone. So my name is Justin, and I work on the marketing team with Ken, managing the production of our website, video, blogs, and all the source code and stuff that goes with that. And we're going to talk about how we switched to DVCS. So who here knows what DVCS is? Get a hand of it. All right, sweet, everyone. All right, so we're going to quickly go over what DVCS is. And then we're going to talk about how our team switched to DVCS and the hiccups that we ran into, the reasons that we made the decisions that we did, and how we went about moving forward. And the last thing that we're going to talk about is Atlassian and DVCS and where it fits with our products, how we've supported the technologies in the past, and how we're going to support them moving forward. So what is DVCS? So I want to start kind of with VCS, right? So we're all really familiar with this model. There's a central repository server. If you got CVS or Subversion, you check in and out. Everybody goes to the same spot. Maybe you got a build server that pulls the code down. It's pretty much been the same way since 1990. At Atlassian, we noticed that in this order of popularity is how customers are using version control systems. Pretty much most of our customers are on Subversion. We have quite a few people on CVS, and then we have some people that are using Perforce and ClearCase. But there's some issues with these technologies, and the issue is the servers can go down all the time, especially if you have distributed teams. So for us, we have quite a few developers in Sydney. We also have developers here in San Francisco. We got people in Poland. We got people in Amsterdam. And now we got people in Brazil. And especially in Australia, which is the backwater of the internet, we have downtimes all the time. So what we've had to do is we've had to set up replication between the sites in order to keep our developers active. So if the Subversion goes down, all the developers are whining, and next thing you know, they're all running to get coffee, and then there's no code being worked on. Another issue that everyone's aware of is merging. It's a total pain in the ass. On some of the teams that I've been on, we do anything that we can in order to avoid the merging. Can I just get kind of a hand? Who here uses Subversion? Yeah, all right. And then who here is on CVS? All right, and then who here is on proprietary? Perforce. Fair enough. So DVCS, it's this new option. Everybody's talking about it. It's been around since 2005. Git and Mercurial are the two most popular options. They came about because the BitKeeper license was taken away from the Linux kernel developers. So Git is what's used for Linux kernel development. Another option that was developed was Mercurial. And the benefits, the reason that these guys were using this for that is it gave them advantages with a couple of key things. One is localized commits. So what you can do is you can commit to your repository locally on your box and then start up on a new iteration of work. And what that enables you to do is kind of have a stopping point that you can reset against. And then another advantage is that by having a copy of all of the revision history locally on your box, which is what DVCS does, you can run things like diffs. You can annotate the code a lot faster because you don't have to go over the wire in order to get this information. And of course, when you go over the wire, there's a chance that the server can be down. So if you're, let's say, on a plane or you're in a car or you're in a coffee shop that doesn't have internet, you're not able to get that revision history or do any of those annotations without the network connection. And with DVCS, all of that information is local on your box. So here's kind of what it looks like. It's a much more complicated model. And the reason for that is because you have a master repository, just like CVS or Subversion. And what happens is in this example, Bob, what he does is when he checks out the code from the master repository, he pulls all of the information into his local development environment. And then what happens is he runs ads, updates, things like that, and when he checks them into his local repository, and then when he's ready, what he does is he pushes those up to the master repository. Now in the case of Alice, what she can do is she can pull down all of this code as well, and she has all of the repository information on her box. but she can also work with Bob by sending the updates directly to his box. And so they can work on branch information on their own, and then when they're ready, they can push this information up to the master repository. Now, it sounds like it adds a bit of extra complexity, and it certainly does, but it also gives you a variety of advantages that we'll go over. And one of the complaints that people have is there's no sense of owning who the master repository is. So in the DVCS deployment model, it's important that you really standardize on who's going to be the master repository. So a bit of comparison between the two. So with VCS and DVCS, the branching is really easy for both of them. You just simply say, I want to create a new branch. And with VCS, we're all familiar with the merging. It's just been a terrible pain in the ass. With DVCS, because all of the merge information is kept on your box, what happens is it's much easy for you to track the changes as you go through the various revisions that you're committing. And another advantage that I really like is because we're refactoring code all the time, is it keeps track of the renames between your file and how the history works between those files. With VCS, the tool support is awesome. Unfortunately, one of the problems that we ran into when we were switching to DVCS is that we write everything in Java using IntelliJ. We found that the integration with the tool isn't very good. Some plugins are farther developed than others. With VCS, you got to have a connection to the network like we talked about. With DVCS, you don't need the network connection. And just like in the last diagram, with DVCS, you have to define that authoritative trunk. Otherwise, things can get out of control, and you can have forks going in any different direction with DVCS. So there's the two most popular options, which are Git and Mercurial. And I don't want to say one is better than the other. Everybody should kind of decide which one is best for you. Just like these two fighters, one is smaller and agile, the other one's got bigger arms, so it kind of depends on what's right for you. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk about, between Git and Mercurial, what the advantages and disadvantages of each one are. So Git. Git is awesome on a Unix environment. It's developed by the Linux kernel developers, so the integration is perfect in there. But with Windows, however, there's been quite a bit of complaints, right? Like they've not really supported the platform very well. It's coming along, and they've actually started forking some of the technologies from Mercurial in order to make this better. Another complaint against Git is it's a whole new command structure. There's 150 plus commands that everybody has to learn. They're not the same as Subversion, so newbies kind of have an issue in terms of learning these commands. But it's fast, right? It's written in C, it's close to the machine language, so it just works. With all of the merges that the Linux kernel developers have to do, this is what they've designed it to do best. And it's also used by the most open source projects out there. If you go to Wikipedia, you can get a list of all of the various projects that are used by Git, and it's definitely the longest one. And I also want to say that if you want to experiment with Git, there's a great tool out there. It's called GitHub. What it is it's a code hosting utility. They provide free hosting for a couple of repositories, and then you can also fork and share the diffs with your friends pretty easy. With Mercurial, Mercurial has awesome support across all platforms. They got a great installation tool. You just download it, you install it. A lot of people talk about how it's easier to understand, and the reason that it's easier to understand is because, the command structure follows Subversion one-to-one. So add, remove, all those commands pair up pretty well. And so for people that are already familiar with Subversion, it's really easy. Unfortunately, it does have a smaller community adoption. Less people are using it. So that's one thing to consider, when you evaluate a new tool is who's going to support this, right? And one thing that I do like about it over Git, though, is it's developed in Python. And because it's developed in Python, it's really easy and extendable. You don't have to know C. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't used C since college, and I didn't like it then. So that's a good one for it. Then they also have a website available called Bitbucket, And Bitbucket's a lot like GitHub, and what it is it's a code hosting utility where you can host code, you can get a repository free, you can check in code, you can share with friends. We actually have Jesper here from Bitbucket, so if you guys have questions about the technology, feel free to ask him. Can you raise your hand? There he is. So here's kind of a breakdown of who is using what. With Mercurial, it's more enterprise type open source projects that have started adopting Mercurial. And with Git, it's more machine type operating system things that are using it. And there are a couple exceptions. Ruby on Rails and jQuery are on Git. For the desktop tool support, which is the biggest thing that you're going to have to address right away when you start using VCS, is can I integrate with this technology and can I start using it? And with the command line, of course, we talked about how it works perfect. Linux, Mac, Windows for Mercurial. With Git, you got Linux and Mac. That works great. For us at Atlassian, we use IntelliJ for most of our development. And so the first thing we did was I don't want to use the command line if I don't have to because I don't want to have to deal with context switching. There are several plugins for IntelliJ that work. There's 2 of them. They're kind of competing, which is great because the support goes back and forth between them, and they're constantly striving to be the better plugin. The Git support is built in natively with IntelliJ. And so it's been there for a while, and so the support is kind of mature. With Eclipse, it has the same setup as Mercurial for IntelliJ. There's multiple plugins that are competing. And with Git, there's multiple plugins competing as well. In fact, with the Eclipse layer here, there's almost 4 or 5 plugins for each of the DVCS technologies that you can evaluate. For those of you that are on Windows, we started developing IDE plugins at Atlassian so that you can get the best integration across all of our tools. We've noticed that some people are starting to use Visual Studio, and so we've released that. So with Mercurial, there's a utility called Visual HG that works really, really well. It's the most popular one by a landslide. And then for Git, there's multiple plugins that are competing against each other. And I haven't had a chance to try the Visual Studio ones, so I can't tell you how well those work. But with the Eclipse and IntelliJ ones, the support is kind of half there. The visualization features don't work as well as you would like, so understanding how code is forked and being able to see a file as it moves across different commits is a little bit difficult. So we made the switch on our team, which is the Website Task Force, otherwise known as Team WTF, because that's what we say. Every time somebody wants a change on the website, we're just like, what? I don't understand why you want to do that, but okay, fine. So the first question we had to ask ourselves is, what DVCS are you going to use? And we went with Mercurial. And this is why we went with Mercurial. I think that this quote from this blog that I read a little while ago kind of really summarizes everything really well. Mercurial is your smart friend who, let's just say, likes to explain things to you. Git is your genius coworker who sighs and rolls his eyes every time he asks you a question. So we're making the switch. WTF is moving to Mercurial. And so here's a little bit about our team. We have 1 developer in Sydney. There's 2 developers in San Francisco, and we got a graphics designer. So we have a distributed team. And we have 1 requirement that my boss cares about. It's the only thing that we get judged on, is do we have a 24-hour turnaround on bugs on the website and a 48-hour turnaround on copy. Every day he comes in and he wants to know, why isn't my change done? Why isn't my change done? So our entire life is spent adhering to this policy. But at the same time, we have to run larger projects. And a larger project might be building out the new JIRA 4 format that we launched when JIRA 4 came out, or widening the website, or right now we're working on a new order form. And these projects can take months depending on how much effort goes into them. And we've ran into a variety of problems with Subversion. And the biggest one is maintaining multiple branches, right? So our process is kind of reversed, whereas with the engineering teams at Atlassian, they have a smaller subset of updates that go into their branch work, and the majority of their work is done on trunk. When we have these large projects that go on, most of the work is going into the branch, and then we have to merge up to trunk. And it's just been a total pain in the ass for us. And by having to constantly merge between those daily updates and those larger projects that we're doing, we've noticed that there's probably about a 30 to 40% overhead in being able to do updates. So I can't simply say, you know, I need another half person on my team. So what we do is at all costs we avoid branches. And what we'll do is we'll just run multiple versions of trunk on our desktop, and we'll just simply update against those and use the trunk system without checking in. So what ends up happening is one developer has a local copy of this larger project on his desktop, and he essentially becomes the only person that's working on that project. And you know, it works for us, but it isn't ideal. And then for the folks that are in Sydney, if there's ever a data connection problem at the end of the day with our overlap and he can't get the code, what ends up happening is we lose a whole day of development. This doesn't happen very often anymore, but it has happened in the past, and it's just something we try to avoid as much as possible because of the benefits that you get out of having a distributed team where one person can pick up right where another person left off. And so when we sat down and we thought about it, like we said earlier, we looked at the tool support and the learning curve, and it just seemed easier for us to switch to Mercurial. And so we made the switch. And we went ahead and did it, and it took us a while. And it was really important for us when we made the switch that there was no downtime. And so we have about 300,000 lines of code that we have to migrate from Subversion to Mercurial. And this is important because it'll come into the story in a minute here. So when we went to go migrate this code, we have two options. We have the option of Mercurial's built-in convert extension. And what this does is it takes a CVS or Subversion repository and it turns it into a localized database in Mercurial. And then there's another option. Before we talked about how Mercurial is extendable, one of the open source developers has developed a cool tool called hgsubversion. And I love this tool. This is what we ended up using. And it can be used one of two ways. The first option is you can use it to mirror an existing Subversion repository. So I imagine this is what most of you will want to do when you check out the technology is you point it at your Subversion server, it sucks in all of the commits and branch information right to your box, and then what you do is you interact with this code using the Mercurial technology, and then when you're ready, you push off to your Subversion server. So if your team isn't ready to make the switch, you can experiment with the technology locally on your box, and then it does the translation between Mercurial to Subversion. It also does the same thing that the convert extension does, and what it does is it pulls the information out into the database, and then you can push this to wherever you're going to keep your server and just start sharing with everyone, and you can start doing Mercurial as your version repository. Say that again? It does the same thing. The benefit being that you can experiment with it and commit to Subversion, and you just run Mercurial locally on your box. It's a great utility. I'd highly recommend you check it out. I'll talk about it more here in a minute. So we tried both of these things. The first one we did was we tried the convert extension. And this is not the route that I would recommend with everyone. It's bundled with Mercurial. It's not enabled by default. What you do is you edit your HG. And so HG stands in the periodical table of elements. It's Mercurial. So all the commands are HG when you use Mercurial. So you edit your Mercurial configuration file, you enable it, and then you can use the convert extension. Now we ran this against our 270,000 lines of code, and it took 31 hours. Now that's just simply too long if we're a team. Now the thing is it actually took longer than 31 hours. It took us 7 days to get this code exported because we would get out of memory problems. What would happen is the command would run, I'd issue it in the morning on my box, and then a couple hours later it would fail. And then I'd have to start it up again, and it would pick up where it left off, and then it would fail again, And I'm not sitting at my box this whole time running this, and I kind of want to watch it, and I don't want it to automatically start in case there's some type of catastrophic error. So it took over a week at work in order to get our code exported. So that wouldn't really work if you're going to switch your team. And another problem that we had with it was there was no branch information. So we lost all of those branches that we were working on. We just simply ended up with what was in our trunk repository. So this is what it looks like. I mean, it's a fairly simple utility to run. You just type hgconvert, you give it a URL, you point it at your Subversion server, and it just starts running. One thing that I did like about it was, we have 7,500 different commits to our public website, and it sit there and it just went through a countdown timer. So I knew how many commits it had to go. Unfortunately, it was just going to take too long. So then, at the advice of Jesper, actually, we checked out hgsubversion, and this is the tool that we ended up using. It's awesome. It's a Subversion cloning utility, like we talked about. You can use it as a Mercurial client to Subversion, so you can experiment with it. It exports all your code to a database so that you can start from scratch if you want. And the reason that you can really start from scratch is it has all of the branch and tag information right there in one spot. And it didn't crash once. It went up against our repository of 270,000 lines of code, multiplied by the number of revisions and tags that we have, and it took 2 hours to export everything. And so here we got a screenshot of the utility on my desktop. I type hgsummary, and it listed out all the branches that we have. And that was kind of a eureka moment for us, because we were really excited, and we hadn't lost any code in the amount of time that we would run the export overnight. So we had all of this code, and then what we decided was, all right, so we got this code, and we need to start working together on it. And so what we did was we didn't want to bug our IT team. Just like we're moving to SaaS for quite a bit of our hosting, we said, all right, well, where are we going to host the code? And we decided to go with Bitbucket. You can set up your own server. You simply go to Bitbucket. You can register. It's really cheap. It starts at $5 a month, and you can get up to 5 repositories, and everybody can start interacting with each other. So we did that, and another advantage that it had, remember before I talked about the visualization tools aren't built into the IDE tools yet, you can get some branch visualization. So if I fork the repository to work on something, and another person forks the repository to work on something, I can kind of see how the code is moved over time and how it's come back together. And the other advantage is the user management. It's really easy. Anybody can go and register. I can give them access to my repository, and they can instantly get access. And so we exported our code. It was really simple. I just did an HG push. I gave it the URL to my Bitbucket repository, and it sent up the 270,000 lines of code multiplied by the number of revisions we had. It turned out to be 821 megabytes, and it took 45 minutes. So for our code base, we could have done this all in one swoop in 3 hours. We could have migrated everything. We did it over a couple of weeks while we were experimenting with it, but 3 hours of downtime. This is what Bitbucket looks like. It's kind of a little bit like Fisheye, except for it's built for DVCS. You can browse all of your files that are in your version control system. You can get overview of the chain sets. You can see which people are interested in your code. You can get RSS feeds for code changes. And they also have some additional features. I highly recommend you guys check this out if you want to experiment with DVCS, specifically Mercurial. So this is the part that I think I'm most excited about, is we can talk about Atlassian and DVCS. So the tool support right now is it's pretty crappy, to be honest. Technology is about 5 years old, and it's just finally starting to get adoption in the community. So here's where we're at with JIRA and DVCS. For JIRA, what you're going to need to do if you want to integrate DVCS into JIRA is you're going to need to get Fisheye if you want official support from Atlassian. So we're going to start building out DVCS technology agnostically for Git and Mercurial into all of our products. And the center of that is going to be done with Fisheye. We originally released Git support in June of 2009, so it's a year old. We've continued developing it. And then recently, last month, we released alpha support for Mercurial. This is how we're going to connect everything. Who here is using JIRA with Fisheye by chance? Sweet. So you're going to be able to go to the Sources tab. You're going to have Git or Mercurial integrated in the same way that you have Subversion now. Now there's another option. Pretty much everybody in here has Fisheye, but if you don't have Fisheye, there is the plugin ecosystem option. There is a plugin. It works with JIRA 4 and JIRA 4.1. It was released in 2007. And there was a recent update, I think on June 3rd. And this product is, plugin, is actively developed by the community. So it's an option if you're not happy with the fisheye integration now, or if you don't own fisheye. Yep.
I'm the developer for that, and I would say use fisheye as well. Atlassian, it works, it's good, but fisheye's the direction to go in the future.
All right, well, there you go. And then Git. So Git story isn't as good, unfortunately, for the plugin system if you don't own fisheye. The plugin only works with the older versions of JIRA 3.12 and 3.13, and the last update was August of 2009. So Bamboo. Bamboo is the only tool that doesn't use fisheye in terms of getting its DVCS integration. And so internally, we are testing Mercurial integration with Bamboo. I believe the release went out a couple weeks ago for staff to start testing. We're trying to stick to a 98-day release cycle and expect the release to be available later this year so that you can pull in your Mercurial repository directly into Bamboo for your builds. There is another option. So the Git story is a little bit better with Bamboo if you're using GitHub. There's a plugin. It works with Bamboo 2.2 to 2.5. And this was released in March of 2010. And what this will do is it'll connect to your GitHub repository. It will pull in the code. You can run your builds. You can keep your manager happy knowing that all your unit tests are passing. So wrap up. So everyone always comes up to me and they're like, I don't know why I would use DVCS. It doesn't really address any problems that I have, or maybe I'm not really happy about having to maintain multiple forks and things like that. And there was a quote on a blog that I read last week that I think really summarizes things really well. Instead of asking what problems it solves, you should be asking yourself what new possibilities it gives you. And if you think about it like that and you start experimenting with the tool, for me, the thing that I really like about it the most is localized commits. Like, I get my code to a point that I want it, and then I commit it to my repository, and then I start up with a new set of experiments to see if something is going to work the way that I want. And if it doesn't, I can roll back locally, and I haven't lost all of that time. And that way I don't have to check into the repository, make sure my unit tests are working, that Bamboo fires off, let other developers merge. It's a more iterative approach to my own local development. Git and Mercurial, I think, are going to end up being the clear winners. Git certainly is ahead of Mercurial in terms of adoption. But at Atlassian, we think that Mercurial is the choice for people in the enterprise. That said, over the next year, Atlassian is going to switch all of our Subversion code to be running on Mercurial. But for those of you that are interested in Git, we're not going to abandon you. What we've decided is that we're going to be agnostic to the technologies, and we're going to support both of them in all of our products. And so you're going to see more and more integration features coming out for the products, specifically with JIRA and with fisheye. And if you want to experiment with these tools, we talked about the Mercurial bridge that allows you to connect locally to a Subversion server and do Mercurial back and forth between your IDE or on the command line. There's a tool also available for Git. I can't think of what it is off the top of my head, but it also works for that as well. So what's that? Git SVN, that's what it is. And so you can use that to do the same thing. And if you're going to experiment with Mercurial, we went through both of the tools, and hgsubversion extension is the tool that you want to use in order to move forward and do all of that. So a couple of resources here for everyone. There's a wonderful blog. Unfortunately, it's wrote by one of our competitors. But it's called hginit, and what it is, it's a tutorial that walks you through getting up and running on Mercurial, walks you through some examples of doing merging between different code bases. I believe it uses a recipe as an example. It's done by Joel Spolowski, and it'll probably take you about 3-4 hours to run through this tutorial. There's GitHub if you want to use Git in order to test Git without having to set up and run anything. And then there's hgsubversion. Here's the URL for that if you want to use that utility in terms of connecting your local desktop against a Subversion server. And then Bitbucket. And Bitbucket's a great site for hosting your code and experimenting with the technology, maybe forking an existing product and seeing how different chain sets can be committed to your source code. So there we are.
Thanks, Justin.